Kia ora, we are live. We're now streaming on Facebook and people are starting to arrive. No mai haramai. We are going to wait for a couple of minutes and let people find themselves, settle in. Feel free to introduce yourself on the chat where you're streaming in from today. Kia ora Renee from Whaingaroa. This is my favorite bit. Who's here? Oops, it's moving too fast. Okay. Tori from Mount Eden, Mel in Foxton. Kia ora, welcome. Elizabeth in Christchurch. Nathan from Waikato. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Christina from Whanganui. Excellent. Stan from Oratia. That is in Tamaki Makaurau. Hayes from Tamaki as well. And Zoe. We have Tamaki Makaurau and here in Horse. Cal from Westport. Kia ora. Kia ora to our Te Waipounamu viewers. I'm sure my mother is in there somewhere. Andy from Sandringham. Is that in Auckland? I think that's a... And Aroha from Wellington. Kia ora. Lately of the Manawatu. Nali from Te Tairāwhiti, where the sun rises and the centre of the universe. Oh, kia ora T from West Auckland. Good to see you here. And Jess here in Wellington. Oh, welcome, Carla. Anybody who works with young people must be a wonderful person. Kia ora, Danny from Kerekere Roa. You always represent. Alison, famous Alison Hamblett. So lovely to have you here today. And Murphy from Tamaki Makaurau. Oh, this is lovely. And Jack from Te Taio Bautini and living in Rangimatarau, which is Point Shea. Awesome. I see the numbers have started to settle down, so we might get started. Kia ora Nicola from Kapiti. And I know Kiri is watching this on the train. Kia ora Daniel from, and all of our whānau here from the Rainbow Greens and the Young Greens. So much I could not do what I do without you. All right, let's get going. So, as you'll be aware, because you've joined us, this is streaming live on Facebook. Wherever you are in the privacy of your own place, because we cannot see you, we cannot hear you eating, or we cannot notice what you are wearing right now. So be relaxed, be comfortable, and it'll be just here. Okay. We're going to start, of course, with karakia, and I'm going to invite my colleague and longtime friend, Kevin Haunui, to join us to do that.
Tēnā tātou. Tēnā tātou, I rungu te kaupapa whakawhaiti nei tātou I tēnei pō. Tēnei te karakia mā tātou. I tau nei ki rungi a tātou katoa, te wairua nā mātua tūpuna. Nā rātou I whakatakoto te ara he hikoina mā tātou, nā uri. I whakatōki a tātou Ngākau ki ngā tikanga hei arataki a tātou, kia Ngākau nui ki te hāpai a tātou mahi katoa, I roto I te pono I te tika I te māramatanga. Me te aroha no tētahi ki tētahi koia rā, I rongo whakairi ake ki runga kia tīna. Tīna, haumi e hui e, tai ki e. Kia ora Elizabeth.
Kia ora. We're going to just do some quick housekeeping. Shout out to Philippa, who is currently signing for us, and she will be sharing that work with Amy. So thank you so much for being here. For everyone not familiar with Zoom, if there are any of you left, the chat function is at the bottom. If you want to make comments, you are very welcome to, and really welcome to keep introducing yourself. But if you want to ask a question, then put it into the Q&A, because that's where we'll be looking for questions. And so we're going to meet some of our panelists soon, and they are all, I think, well, all friends of mine. I'm very thankful, very honoured to call them friends, but they are leaders in their own right, of course, in our rainbow communities. And so that is Kevin Haunui, Marnie Mitchell, Moira Clunie, and Jason Myers. And very shortly, yes, here we go. And now you can see their wonderful faces. So in this event, we'll give a bit of an overview of our next campaign. We'll be doing you'll hear some media things coming out over the next couple of days. We're going to let the third reading of the Conversion Practices Prohibition Bill have some airtime, because that is what I'm going to do immediately after this. It'll be read in the House. And we're going to hear from each of these panelists how this proposal will impact on their work. And then we'll just throw it open for questions, and let's have a bit of a kōrero. So a bit of an overview. This concept is one that was originally designed by, as I like to call her, the legendary Jan Logie, who has led our rainbow work in the Greens, but also in this House, in Parliament for many, many years. She is, however, a very humble person. Me, quite a bit less so. And so I feel I must always acknowledge the work that she does, because she is not one to take credit. And this idea is about the establishment of a ministry for rainbow communities. Now, those of us who've been around a while will remember when there used to be the Rainbow Desk, and we had two people and they coordinated things across government. We want a much, much bigger version of that, because we need that function where we can address the institutional barriers that face rainbow people in so many parts of our of government that impacts on our daily life. And I know from the range of people who are on this call, and even just the range of speakers we have here, have worked for years, and you're in working with that part of the community, working with that part of government, to just keep fighting, to just keep advocating, to put in submissions, to go to yet another consultation meeting, to do the UPRs at the United Nations, to try and put pressure on our government to actually live up to the view it has of itself. And we see that this could be a mechanism that works across all of the other government departments and refines that work, but also monitors that progress and holds them to account for it. And we see that only a ministry would have the actual power to do that. We see this in the reforms, pai ora, the whole entire restructure of our health system. We are fighting hard, and I have the select committee tomorrow where we see if we can get a rainbow strategy over the line and have that put in legislation. So it's coordinating. How does that happen? If we can't achieve that, how are we creating gender affirming healthcare pathways throughout this country? If there's going to be no more postcode lottery, what does that look like for our trans, intersex and non-binary whānau who are seeking healthcare? It's about the development and implementation of the conversion practices ban that's going into law tonight. At this stage, it's going to be so hard to prosecute someone all of the pressure will fall on the Human Rights Commission. They've had to set up an entire team to just deal with the planning for this. They're going to be inundated with people. A ministry then could provide that support and look at ways of redress, but also how can we, and I'm thinking particularly, I was just today reading Te Ngākau Kahukura's submission again, and saying we don't want people going to jail. We want education. We want proper information for whānau. But always, it is the community producing these, identifying the need, fundraising, writing yet another funding application to get this done. Let's have a ministry that funds this, that actually commissions work out in the community, that actually listens to community leadership. An LGBTI inclusion strategy that upholds international human rights. What does it look like if we actually were meeting all our obligations for the documents we have signed for the United Nations Declaration on Indigenous Peoples, all the different mechanisms where I know in advocating for intersex people that this is freedom from torture is a basic human right, and yet the oppressive surgical and medical interventions that still happen in this country continue. So we want to be able to have a unified way in which we look at all of these. And many people, again, been around for a while, we've talked about a rainbow strategy, we've talked about ways, and we work, the bulk of us, really closely together. We share language, we share triumphs, and we commiserate together. How about the government puts real resource into this and enables all of our organisations to have proper infrastructure, proper capacity, and not have to compete against each other to get that resource. Te Aotearoa, the national strategy to eliminate family violence and sexual violence. So proud of that work from our co-leader as the Minister, Marama Davidson, leading that work. And she worked closely with our rainbow communities to ensure that rainbow people were properly represented in that space. How are we going to make sure that's done properly moving forward? Who's monitoring it? Who checks that? If there's not actually a rainbow ministry led by a person with a lived rainbow experience running that. And that is the thing that worries me. They would say, yes, yes, we need a strategy. Yes, yes, we need this thing. And it's like, and now what? How is this rolling out over time? And the education system. So I mean, every part, justice, it's every single part. And so many groups such as Inside Out, Rainbow Youth, who work closely with our schools but it's, you know, to create that change, to look at their policies, it's one school at a time. What would it look like if we had a ministry that says, actually, this is what every single school is required to do and report back on the progress of. And so we would have high hopes of this ministry. And so what I would like to do now, though, is open the space and get feedback from our panels here, because this is our suggestion. This is what we think will be a genius idea. We're interested to hear your feedback, but also what you think might be the risks for this, what might not work, what things we have to be really conscious of when we're trying to do this. And so, as I said, these are great leaders in our communities. I'm going to ask them to briefly introduce themselves and then have a kōrero. Kia ora, and we're going to start with the fabulous Moira Clunie.
Kia ora, Elizabeth. Kia ora koutou. He mihi aroha ki a koutou katoa. Yeah, ko Moira Clunie tuku ingoa he uri tēnei no te raroa, no ko te rana ingarani airani ahau. I'm Moira, I'm project lead for Te Ngākau Kahukura, and I guess my work in the kind of paid and voluntary and academic space for the last little while has been around rainbow, wellbeing and justice. So also I'm co-chair of Outline at the moment, and volunteer with the Professional Association for Trans Health Aotearoa, and I've done some academic work around rainbow community leadership and the kaupapa of suicide prevention, particularly. Yeah, thanks for having me here today. Kia ora Elizabeth, and kia ora Kevin, moto karakia as well. This is exciting. I feel like this has been a major gap for a long time. I think, as you've said, Elizabeth, there's some amazing leadership and work that goes on at the community level, and some really strong advocacy to government across a whole range of different kind of issues and areas. And there's some amazing people in Parliament and kind of at that governance level who put things forward and make speeches in Parliament, kind of respond to things, but there's kind of no one in the middle whose job it is to really action this stuff. So there's a real lack of like policy levers, like actual strategies or actual plans or rainbow communities, Takatapui communities being recognised in policies across the issues that we know affect us, like mental health, homelessness, the whole range of different things. And then also just a real lack of rainbow expertise and operational responsibility in some of those government agencies. And so there might be really well-meaning people, but they just not really sure who they should be talking to, or don't really know what they don't know, and don't really have the responsibility, like it's or the mandate to be doing work with our communities. So often there's some really good conversations and some good intentions, but they don't kind of really go anywhere. So yeah, excited to see where this goes, and I think excited to see it really designed with communities as well. I guess Elizabeth, you talked about potentially the dangers of something like this, and I guess the big thing I would see is that it could just be another Wellington bureaucracy that's kind of not so well connected to communities, and that the people who are in those positions might not have the kind of relevant knowledge or relationships or connections back to communities. So I guess yeah, it would be important to recruit the right people, but also to kind of design the function of a ministry with the right kinds of mandate to enable community leadership rather than take over. And I guess, yeah, it's just exciting in terms of, I really appreciate the title of the session around doing better for our rainbow communities as well. I think a lot of the amazing work that's been happening in Parliament has been about really our basic rights to exist, you know, like, can we ban conversion practices so that people are not allowed to torture each other, and this kind of thing? Can we add something into the Human Rights Act to say that you explicitly can't discriminate against trans and intersex people? Like, these are kind of basic things, but we need to really move past that into like actually doing the work across, you know, where people who need to have access to education, to healthcare, to housing, to employment, to cultural connection, to you know, just be able to live our lives in all the different spaces that everybody does. And so we need to move past just kind of constantly being the target of these debates to actually, yeah, getting stuck in and doing the work that needs to be done to make sure we can live our lives equitably. That's my 2 cents. Kia ora again. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. And just to say, everybody, I'm taking notes. So that's why I'm looking down while I'm talking. And I'm going to pass to the legendary B Mitchell.
Elizabeth and everybody on the panel tonight. Gosh, what a lineup. So B Mitchell, I'm an intersex person. I identify as non-binary and queer. So by way of starting, I was born in 1953, so I'm a post-war baby, and I'm thinking about what's going on in Europe at the moment, just, you know, to sort of transition us. So I came out as a queer identified person in my late teens, so was around before homosexual law reform. So have seen change in this country, you know, some good things, and then any of that change process, watch the horrific mobilization against our community. So for context today, I'm also a mental health professional, I'm a teacher, so have seen, you know, our community and what happens in our community, and I have my own lived experience of being an intersex person. So we'll start there because lots of people don't understand, including intersex people, why we should be part of the umbrella. So I think it's important to understand that the medical narrative that treats and works with intersex people and their whānau is deeply homophobic, deeply transphobic at a level where it's not explicit. So I've always believed that intersex community deserves, irrespective of our gender identity or our sexual orientation, to stand in this space. And that's why I love this notion of an umbrella, because our community is incredibly complex. And the youth of Aotearoa have magnificently added to that complexity, both language and lived identities and realities. So we're a very diverse community. Now, the work that's been done in Australia, and it's interesting because the person who set up the LGBTI Health Alliance in Australia came from New Zealand's own Rainbow Desk. So Gabi went from New Zealand to set that up. So I've been around long enough to know when New Zealand had what was called the Rainbow Desk. So it was inside MSD. At its height, it had a staff of 3. And the role of that group was to monitor legislation and make sure that there was a rainbow perspective. It was, for the fact that it only had a staff of 3, it was incredibly successful in the work that it did. And it's really interesting because that group was never disestablished. So when National came into power, what they said was, this work can be done by anybody. And I'm reinforcing a point that Moira just made. Anyone in MSD can do this and do this overview. So we know the library was disestablished, all that knowledge was lost. And within a year, nobody was making any comments on any legislation from a rainbow perspective. We don't know for sure how large our community is, but I'm going to suggest that it's somewhere between 12 and 15% of the community. And no other group that is that substantial doesn't have visibility and recognition at the very top in government. So the fact that we don't means that our community is still exposed to homophobia, transphobia, and just the complete ignorance that often goes well-intentioned people, well-meaning people who do not understand our community. So Elizabeth, the fact that you have picked up this baton from Jan is beautiful, and I hope that we are successful in achieving this goal. It will make a huge difference for our community across all the things that Moira was talking about. So it's an honour to be part of this panel this evening, and I look forward to the questions that will follow at the end of this. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you so much. And we're going to pass directly to Jason.
Kia ora. I ngā mana, i ngā waka, i ngā reo e rauranga tira māti nā koutou katoa. Ko Jason Myers, taku ingoa, ko tangata tiriti te iwi, ko taku mahi ki te tua papa mā te arai kore o Aotearoa ko te kaiwhakahaere mātua. Tēnei te miki kia koe Kevin, mō tō karakia, and tēnā koe Elizabeth. Thank you for this mahi, and also acknowledge Jan, who I've had earlier conversations with about this. I also want to acknowledge in this space as I start my relative privilege as a member of this community, and in that my fellow panellists who bring an amazing diversity of views and experience, and it's a real privilege to be here alongside you. I'm the Chief Executive of the AIDS Foundation, and I've been in that role for nearly 6 years. And for those of you who don't know us, we're a national prevention and support organisation delivering social marketing, policy and research, and a range of health services. And all of our work is aimed at both reducing the incidence of HIV in Aotearoa and helping to ensure people living with HIV are doing so with as much dignity as they can. And I'm guessing why I'm here tonight is because HIV in Aotearoa, as well as other STIs, actually significantly disproportionately impacts our rainbow communities, and in particular, gay and bisexual men in Takatapui, Tāne. The numbers here are frightening. So gay and bisexual men in Aotearoa are 348 times more likely to be diagnosed with HIV than heterosexuals, and 163 times more likely to be diagnosed with syphilis. We don't have data. This is one of the problems for our trans communities, but we know internationally they also suffer disproportionate burden of HIV. And so from my little lens of the world, how might a rainbow ministry help? There's 3 things I just wanted to touch on and hopefully get some conversation going about. And really, it turns out it's really just total of comments that have already been made by earlier panellists. The first is the potential I think it could have for research and data. We know that whether we're talking about policy or program and service delivery, it will only ever be as good as the information we have informing it. And we know that the data we have on rainbow community experiences, needs, desires is so sorely lacking. And so I guess I reflect on the potential that a ministry committed to better outcomes for rainbow communities could offer in this space. The second is this word comes up for me, and it's intersectionality. You know, in my intro, I touched on HIV and broader sexual health. But one of the other reasons I feel excited about the potential of a rainbow ministry is that we know that it is across so many domains that rainbow communities experience stigma, discrimination, and ultimately inequitable outcomes. So whether it's HIV or sexual health or broader health or housing or employment, the list goes on. And in my experience, there's multiple government departments trying to do good work in this space, but it's often siloed and doesn't take a holistic view of what it is to be rainbow. And so wouldn't it be great to have a government department that got this and took an approach that acknowledged and valued intersectionality? And the third thing I think, and again, it's been touched on already, is the potential for a rainbow workforce. It's been said, there's many people in the public service today that are well-meaning and well-intentioned. But if you're anything like me, you will have sat in 30-minute meetings where you spend the first 20 minutes educating someone on something they should already know because of the job they're trying to do. And this is about lived experience. Even more frustrating and alarming than that is when you're sitting in a meeting and it's totally obvious to you that the public servant across from you is frankly homophobic or transphobic, and here they are in a position of power and influence. So I get really excited about the potential of building a rainbow workforce that accurately reflects the awesome diversity that we are. So I'm going to leave it there, and I hope that's just a useful contribution and food for thought. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora, Jason. I know that you may have only been, well, only 6 years is a long time, the boss at NZAF, but you have had years and years much longer before that, holding space in this kaupapa of HIV/AIDS. So just mahi to your work as well in our communities. And I'm going to hand over to Kevin.
Kia ora tātou. It's absolutely an honour to be here, Elizabeth, and to join in with my esteemed colleagues on the panel to offer some feedback in relation to, the establishment of a ministry of rainbow communities. Just to introduce myself a little bit further, I am Takatapui and I'm Moira. And so my iwi affiliations are wide, going from Ngāti Hau in the west, Ngāti Rangi in the middle, Ngāti Uanuku in the middle of the North Island, across to Ngāti Kahungunu on the eastern coast, and then up further north, adjacent Ngākau and Whanaopanui in the Bay of Plenty. My background is varied. For the past 20 years, I've been a member of Tīwhanawhana Trust alongside Elizabeth, Dr. Elizabeth Kerekere. And in my view, Tīwhanawhana Trust has held a space effectively for Takatapui, and really just holding that space and advocating where we are, where we can. So tonight I'm speaking from a Takatapui perspective, my views from a Takatapui perspective of the establishment of a rainbow ministry. And in that sense, a rainbow ministry for me does reflect perhaps some of the problems that we as Māori and Takatapui might encounter, and that we might get lost in the whole translation of being rainbow. So I think it is really important that the ministry and the community have a very clear idea and a philosophy around rainbow communities and the place of Takatapui and Māori in that relationship with each other in Aotearoa. So Te Tiriti o Waitangi is a key founding principle for this. And then I think it's because of the cultural narrative that has evolved with Māori and Takatapui in Aotearoa, that cultural narrative needs to be corrected. It doesn't mean to say that we're all the same. I'm not saying that. We align along many different ways that we interpret being a part of the rainbow community, but we come from perhaps different philosophical backgrounds, and it's those things that I think need to be clearly established. Give us a really strong base from which we here in Aotearoa can work from, because otherwise we get confused, in my view. So, you know, if there's anything I wanted to say, that was really it. Make sure that our base for the ministry of rainbow communities is really well founded. It would be too easy, I think, to race off and action things without having that strong base. So again, I reiterate that as my point. My current work is project lead for Te Whāriki Takapau with a number of different projects, and this is where that intersectionality comes into play in terms of updating statistics around men who have sex with men. But again, wanting to reflect on the Māori approach is a whole of whānau approach, whereas from a Aotearoa approach, sometimes that becomes siloed towards individuals. So again, understanding the background and the philosophy and the strength of how we operate here in Aotearoa is something to aspire to. So I really look forward to, Elizabeth, how things go, but that's my contribution at this time. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you so much, everybody. And just as is commonly that for me is I jumped right in, did not introduce my own self. So just quickly halfway through the meeting, just to say, he moka punau o te tai rāwhiti ki te taho tōku pāpā, ko whānau ākai, ko te aitanga mahaki, ko Ngāti Onioni, ko rongo whakātami ngai taumanihiri. And on my mother's side, I hail from County Clare and County Tipperary in Ireland. I am Takatapui, and yeah, I have worked with Kevin for decades now. I'm working to advocate for Takatapui, particularly in Tīwhanawhana Trust. As far as I'm concerned, I'm just on loan from Tīwhanawhana in Parliament. I still feel like that's who I represent when I'm here. And so Takatapui, and we'll also answer to Lesbian Femme. And I'm just going to put it out there that next week I celebrate 30 years anniversary of being with my partner at Aotearoa. Shout out to my hot wife. And because, as I like to say, every happy relationship is an act of revolution. So let us do that. And in this case, we're going to have healthy relationships with government. And we're going to model how government could work, not in silos, but actually in an integrated way, because it's not just for rainbow communities that needs to happen. All of us need that to happen. And I want to acknowledge all of the languages, all of the cultures, and all of the spiritualities that are represented in this room, because we are never just rainbow. We are all of the other things. And we have to always make sure that when we're in these spaces that we don't forget that although we can be unified around being rainbow, we are, as others have said, a very, very diverse communities, and we come from many different traditions. So let us always, as Kevin says, have a strong, strong foundation that acknowledges whakapapa, acknowledges mana right from the beginning. Now, we're going to have a look at some of your questions. Now, I'm not sure how to say your first name. Is it Shenli Anna, who is intersex? Shenli, thank you. Shenli Anna. So I think in the text that I have in front of me that Shenli is talking about particular handicaps or barriers that there are for intersex people, that they're often asked very sexual things, that their lives are sexualized because of diverse sex characteristics, that there needs to be training for staff, mentoring for staff to make sure that they can treat people respectfully. I'm wondering if you can see this, Mani, if you wanted to add to this. And please.
Shenli, thank you for your question. And a number of us have talked tonight about the training that needs to happen right across the board, and our doctors probably need more training than others. Yes, I have a colleague in Australia that talks about our squidgy bits, and our squidgy bits belong to us, and nobody's business unless that is the reason that we are with a clinician or a doctor. And I'm sorry that you have had that experience. And I think that a ministry would help us with our work. Those of us that do this are very small in number. We're making some grounds, but we need critical mass, and I think a ministry would do that. And then the really critical thing is the training and education across the board of all providers. So this horrific experience that you've had never happens again. And I'm so sorry, and thank you for sharing tonight. Unfortunately, it's an experience that far too many in our community have had. So thank you.
Alison Hamlet, will the new ministry assist in clarifying the Human Rights Act in terms of gender identity, gender expression and sex characteristics, and also help the Department of Internal Affairs in terms of the BDMRR to develop applications for overseas born New Zealanders, refugees and migrants? I would hope absolutely yes. I imagine in terms of timing that I would hope all those things were already done before our ministry got into place. And I think how well that gets done will be part of how much we can continue to assert the need for a ministry. Because when we asked, for example, inside the conversion practices legislation, and I think Pātha, New Zealand, Wellington, Human Rights Commission and others said that we should identify and define what gender identity and gender expression is in the Act. And they said, oh no, it exists in other legislation, but of course it does not. And so now they've said, oh, it's okay, we'll update it when we update the Human Rights Act. We don't have a date on when that will happen, but we'll definitely be chasing that up. So this is exactly what we would see this ministry doing. And we hope that there will be many other pieces of legislation that they will need to do this for.
And maybe Elizabeth would give a shout out to Tane, who works in the Human Rights Commission, holds this space, but does so by himself. And wouldn't it be wonderful if he had a ministry to work with and be supported by?
Kia ora, and that is Tane Polkinghorn. It's too many legends around, but still true. He does incredible work in our communities, but I also want to shout out that the fact that the Human Rights Commission has set up an actual unit to deal with the breadth of work that is required to deal with the responsibilities that they're going to have to face with this legislation. So huge respect to the Human Rights Commission. Kia ora T. T is co-chair of the cross-agency Rainbow Network, CALM, who had their national conference last year in Parliament. How could we support the kaupapa? Now, I think this leads into what you were saying about workforce, Jason. I wondered, do you want to have a go at this one? So these are Rainbow people throughout government.
Yeah, I mean, I'll reflect from a medical perspective, maybe, but I think there's similar parallels. You know, and I'll go back to the data again. We know that, again, in my world, almost half of gay men in Aotearoa are not out to their general practitioner. And so what does that mean in terms of translating that into appropriate levels of care? And those numbers will likely be much lower for even more stigmatized members of rainbow communities. And why? Because there's fear. There's fear of stigma, discrimination, judgment. So there's a whole host of work there that needs to be done in the area of medical training. The public service, I'm not sure I'm best qualified. Moira, maybe?
Yeah, I could give it a go. I think what came to mind there was the idea of a cross-agency rainbow network is so valuable. And I think to have this work well, we really need to see government agencies be able to work together effectively. Like that's going to be another danger around this, I guess, is that, you know, as Kevin was saying, it's really important that this work centres Takatapui and Māori. It's really important that this is intersectional, and we've got agencies at the moment. We've got the Ministry for Pacific People, we've got Te Puni Kōkiri, we've got the new Ministry for Disability Communities, ethnic communities, youth, older people. Rainbow communities, you know, rainbow people exist across all of those different communities. And wouldn't it be awesome to see, you know, a team of like some staff members who sit across Te Puni Kōkiri and the Ministry for Rainbow Communities, or some kind of like innovative and new structures like that to make sure that that Takatapui issues are being thought about in both spaces. Because I guess at the moment, you know, Te Puni Kōkiri, there's been a couple of examples in the last decade I can think of where there's been Takatapui work that's come out of there, and it's tended to be where there's been some specific advocacy and there's been a receptive person and they've put Takatapui into like the criteria for a fund that they have going out around, like rangatahi suicide prevention is one that I can think of. But there's not roles in there at the moment that focus on Takatapui or on Māori rainbow issues. And you know, like that, like government likes to put things in boxes and work in silos. And, you know, if people were thinking about where would you put a Takatapui role, would that be in the Ministry for Rainbow Communities? Would that be in Te Puni Kōkiri? Maybe it should be in both. Like there definitely needs to be a conversation across those ministries and between rainbow communities and all of those different population groups as well. And so I think, yes, maybe something can be thinking about is like, how can you model and role model ways of working together and collaborating across ministries, and how can you try and break down some of those barriers to ministries collaborating? Because I know from outside of government, working in NGOs for the last 16 years or so, that's a real difficulty. Like often it's much easier for NGOs to collaborate with each other and for me as someone working in an NGO to talk to two different ministries than it is for those ministries to talk to each other. They've got different ministers they're reporting to, they've got different strategies, different priorities, and it just, like, there might be good intentions there, but it's often quite difficult. And so I think maybe that's something that Khan as a network could be thinking about, is like, how can you build up some examples of cross-agency work and start to use those relationships that you have to kind of try and break down some of those silos a bit.
Kia ora, thank you. And just mihi to Mel, who's just said that they ran into Kevin McKelvey. He was the chair of the Governance and Administration Select Committee that considered the BBMRR, and he moved his opinion quite dramatically after the hearings. So I got to work quite closely with him. So I'm totally going to hit him up support. Let's see. A couple of people have mentioned about the disability ministry that's set to launch, and maybe we can do a similar process. We actually had to do some research on how you set up a ministry, because this is the thing. It's good to have these great ideas, but what is the actual process? And it does require one minister or a group of ministers needs to put together a proposal and then get approval from cabinet. Then it needs to go to the Public Service Commissioner, and then consultations happen, and different scenarios will be looked at. Should it be a ministry or a department or a departmental agency? So they will look at different options. We're going for a ministry as the type of structure that will have the most mana and then have its own minister, which I think has got to be the goal. So this is not a simple thing. This will take some time and some effort, but we wanted to put it out there because the budget will be announced in May, and then immediately after that, the budget for next year, the process for it will begin. We want to put this out there, and our goal is later this week we'll be launching a petition to do this. As we'll continue to do research, we'll continue to do this consultation, but we want to build up a bit of a groundswell to say, actually, this is something that needs to happen. As Mani has said, 12 to 15% of the population is thousands and thousands of people. And I'm hoping we can get behind this with all of our whānau and our allies. And because without a groundswell, this will not happen. It's just not going to happen. So we will work through the machinery government, and we'll get advice on those who have done it before. And I'm just noticing Gordon's comment that let's try to avoid doing all of the work of setting up a rainbow ministry and have it led by someone who is not rainbow. Let's avoid that. Let's make sure that this structure is put in place so that does not happen. And it's the same, we cannot have a situation where we have a whole lot of non-rainbow staff, fabulous as many of our allies are. They cannot be the majority in this case. So that is the goal. Mason Jerry's metrics of flourishing. I am embarrassed to say on live stream that I cannot comment on that. What I would say, and maybe I'll pass to Kevin to flesh this out, is if we're going to do it a base of Te Tiriti or Waitangi, then mātauranga Māori has got to be key in the ways that we look at that. Kevin or any of our other panels?
Kia ora, Elizabeth. I do have to leave following the comment I'm about to make, so this is my opportunity to say that. Yes, mātauranga Māori is essential in terms of being able to give us that grounding in terms of what is flourishing. But really also I wanted to comment on the question that Queenie, mihi ka mihi atu ki a koe Queenie, for your question. because I think it's through mātauranga Māori and through perhaps a gathering of elders, because whakapapa is our knowledge comes down to our elders. They give us information. We give them information about the context today, and then we work out what it is that, how we're going to understand things going forward. So for me, I think that's the message I wanted to leave. It is a whole of whānau approach, and in mātauranga Māori, elders and kaumātua have an esteemed place and have a place to help us, give us the right platform and direction. Nō reira, tēnā tātou. Elizabeth, thank you again. Tēnā tātou katoa. Aroha mai, I need to leave at this point. Kia ora.
Thank you for being here so much. Now, we have several questions and 8 minutes left. I'm going to invite our speakers to go into these questions. Can you see them? And pick something that you think sounds interesting that you would like to respond to. So I'm going to, let's see. Who's next on my screen is Mani.
Oh, I haven't had time to read. So Elizabeth, pick one for me, please.
Okay. How would you see the establishment of the ministry working to ensure that the people involved with establishing it and employed are the best people to represent us at that level with the privilege inherent to those positions? Kia ora, Angelo.
We do have good systems for selecting the right people, and I have no doubt now there's enough brilliant, well-skilled minds in our community. So the key thing would be advertising across our community, and then making sure, and I would say it's already been mentioned this evening, an advisory group. So the setting up the ministry, there would be a community advisory group to make sure that all these things were done exceptionally well. So we're not going to have a mediocre anything. We're going to shine with extraordinary brilliance in everything that happens. That's what I would be saying.
I love that. We're not going to have a mediocre anything. I love that very much. And just a shout to Zoe saying our rainbow kaumātua is such a treasure and have so much wisdom, passion and experience. Absolutely total for that.
I'm just going to jump in and comment on, is it Brindley? Sorry if I've got your name pronounced wrong, but what ability would a rainbow ministry have to intervene in issues where there's a clear gap in policy, especially in regards to more contentious issues? And really just, I wanted to seriously total with the intention behind the question, because if it's going to happen, it has to be able to have teeth. You know, again, I've got lots of experience of working with a ministry who's trying to influence another ministry. So an example I'm thinking of is in the area of sexuality education. So the Ministry of Health, for example, doing all of this amazing work to try and improve sexual reproductive health outcomes. Of course, a key part of that is sexuality education, but them having absolutely no influence or ability to move curriculum, for example. So if this ministry is to happen, it's going to need to have equivalent, I don't like the word power, but influence, ability to change others, because otherwise it's just going to be another silo.
Thank you, Jason. Have you picked one out, Moira? Did I not give you homework?
I was too distracted by listening to everyone else's brilliant thoughts. Yeah, I guess, I mean, too, in response to that question, and where there are clear gaps in policy, part of the issue at the moment is that it's not really anybody's job in government to pick those up. Like, it might come from an MP, might come from somebody like Elizabeth, like knowing things because you're so well connected to communities and you've been hearing about our issues for years and advocating on them, you know, writing the submissions to the UN. So it might come from that level, but then you haven't got anybody to give, like, whose job it is to pass that on to do all the background work and all the kind of policy advice. And then there's not a rainbow minister that you can be advocating to. So sometimes just because we're there as a government structure, we're not kind of seen as a legitimate population to be dealing with, and so therefore an issue like just might not have been considered because nobody thought to consider it. So I think that your question really illustrates the value of this proposal to have a ministry.
Exactly. Thank you. Kona kia ora. How can we ensure this kaupapa is Takatapui led at every stage? It is my absolute commitment to work to make this happen. And I think if we work from a place that says Te Tiriti o Waitangi is key and is the foundation of how we operate, then it cannot help but have Takatapui leadership in a way that upholds the mana of all the different parts of our community and all of our whānau who we're all connected to. And so, of course, that's going to happen.
And I'm thinking, Elizabeth, we need to come back to the time before the arrival of Europeans, where Takatapui was celebrated and known and culturally significant. So Aotearoa needs to come back to that place and deal with colonisation and the awful legacy.
Kia ora. Thank you. Now, we are 2 minutes from closing and I am going to finish on time. So what I can tell you is that we will, because this is recorded, we will have all your questions in the comments. So we will go through those, and as we further develop our proposal and put it out, then we will craft answers to those as part of this work, and we'll keep on moving through speaking to our communities, and yeah, just keep it moving because we're going to make it happen. I have no doubt. I intend to stay here until it does. So I wanted to just check, would any of you like to have a final word? Money's good. Okay.
Good luck. Let us know how we can help.
Awesome. I totally am going to do that. But also we'll be doing this together. Otherwise it is not going to work. It is not going to work, and it's too easy for the powers that be to split us up and take bits of what they want. But when we're unified in this and we have clarity of vision, clarity of purpose, then we are unstoppable. So I like to finish these hui with my favorite whakatauki. I am a big fan of whakatauki, and it's a really simple one, but it is my favorite, and it's mapango, mawhiro mapango ka oti ai te mahi, with the red and the black, with our combined knowledges, expertise, our passion, our love, our strength, we will get the work done. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. Thank you to our panelists, and kia ora to Kevin. Thank you to Sian and Rosalie, who have done all the background work to make this happen. They make me look good every time. To Philippa and Amy, our interpreters, thank you so very much for helping making this more accessible to our whānau. Have a great night, people. I'm about to go into the house and listen to my colleagues talk about this, and we're going to pass this bill. We're going to ban conversion practices in this country, because that's a good thing to do on a Tuesday night. This petition will go live later in this week. We'll send it out to all of you. Please, let's get it out there. Let's send a clear message to this government that we are a powerhouse. They need to acknowledge us in every aspect of what they do, and we need a ministry to be in charge of everything. So kia ora koutou, ngā mihi aroha kia koutou katoa.
Ngā mihi aroha, thank you.